Absolutely. Ready to
Yep,
go.
great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Building an Online Academic Presence. We are excited to have you here tonight with us. This event was organized by Vanya and I. We are PhD students in the Global Urban Studies program, and we are president and vice president of the Upsilon Sigma chapter here at Rutgers Newark. The chapter is a student-led organization, part of the Honor Society created by the Urban Affairs Association. So our focus is to become a platform for students' development by opening the floor to great scholars to speak to us, like the ones that we have here tonight, and by sharing useful resources. In this opportunity, we'd like to first thank Dr. Mara Sidney, our director, for helping us putting this together. We'd also like to thank the graduate school, in particular the dean, Dr. Tajamir Henderson, who helped us with the promotion of this event and is broadcasting it for us. Thank you so much for the support. So as we're going through such difficult times now during the COVID-19 pandemic, the virtual world and its resources are becoming more and more crucial for students and faculty members. As we're faced with the task of starting or boosting our online academic presence, some of us find ourselves quite confused or overwhelmed. But joining us today, we have two amazing professors, Dr. Raul Pacheco Vega and Dr. Janice Gallagher, who can give us some tips on how to navigate this process. Just as a reminder, if you have questions during the presentations, please write them down in the Q&A session. So without further ado, our next speaker is an interdisciplinary scholar who studies the factors influencing natural resource governance, and he is an associate professor at the Facultad Latinoamericana de Ciencias Sociales at CEDE Mexico. And besides his extensive academic work, he's an enthusiast of social media in academia and has provided students, faculty, and writers with great resources throughout these years in his different online platforms. Here to discuss about how to build your online academic presence, please welcome Dr. Raul Pacheco Vega. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Thank you so very much, Thayan and Vanya. And thank you to Dr. Janice Gallagher for joining me as a co-panelist. This is amazing. As I've said publicly, Dr. Gallagher and I share a lot of really good friends, and I am delighted to be joining you and speaking with you about how to build an academic presence. So I also wanted to thank Dr. Mara Sidney, who is a really good friend and colleague of mine, also in the field of public policy, and she was kind enough to connect me with the group. So I'm very, very happy to see, and I'm very happy to see many familiar faces in this webinar. So I'm going to share with you my slides now, and I'm going to present you with a short yesterday, no less than 24 hours ago, I gave a very similar version of this talk to a different audience, primarily in Australia. So I'm delighted to be able to now give this version here, and I'm happy to entertain questions. I recommended to Professor Gallagher and Thayan and Vanya that I could give my presentation, and then Dr. Gallagher could do hers, and then we can open the floor for Q&A. So I'm happy to also entertain questions in the Q&A. You can post them on the Q&A section of the Zoom link. If you are on Zoom, if you're witnessing through Facebook Live, you can do that on the comment section. And if you're watching it on YouTube, you can also do that on the chat section. So what is the value of Twitter? And I speak from the view of an specific audience of academics in their various forms, as early career scholars, graduate students, or professors, faculty as well. So what I'm going to share today works beyond academia as well. This also, I should warn you that this talk is being recorded, and I'm happy to also entertain the questions while the questions are also recorded. You can find me on Twitter at Raul Pacheco, and you can find my website at www.raulpacheco.org/blog. I actually use both of my last names in a hyphenated manner. So it's my last name is Pacheco Vega. Officially, I changed that in Canada because my mom is an academic and I consider myself a feminist, and I wanted to honor the work that she did. And she's also a professor. So that's why. And that's me, as you can see, me at a conference last year. I love this quote by the magnificent Helen Keller, who says, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And that's so very true. We are a reflection of the networks that we have. And I just want to acknowledge the amazing network I have on Twitter and offline as well. I want to give a special shout out to my writing groups, the Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time, led by Dr. Amanda Bittner, and my Friday one from 2 to 5 p.m. Central Time, led by Dr. Mira Holman, both of whom I consider a very close friend of mine. Both of those groups have provided me an amazing platform for success, and I'm really happy that this pandemic has brought this amazing group and these amazing people as well to me. So I find that there are 5 different ways in which Twitter can be useful in academic context. The first one is to consume current knowledge in a timely fashion. And I'm going to talk about each one of the 5 in my next 5 slides. The second one is to build scholarly networks. The third one is to refine research ideas. The fourth one to obtain and provide emotional support. And the fifth to share resources in an environment of scarcity. And in the spirit of open access, I will also provide a PDF version of this talk, this presentation slides for anybody who wants it. And if you want to post them onto the website of the Global Urban Studies site, I'm happy to provide them for that to be posted. The first one is to consume knowledge in a timely manner. I follow people primarily to see what the hell they're up to. So this is someone I really, really love, Dr. Tom Davis from University of Nottingham. And Tom does a lot of ethnography of dangerous places and marginalized populations. He did an ethnography in Chernobyl of marginalized populations in Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union. So he did a book edited with Alice Ma, who is amazing, and I very strongly recommend her work on derelict, the ethnographies of derelict locations. She did a comparison between Toronto, Sheffield, and Newcastle, if I'm not mistaken. So they both do amazing work. So it was fantastic. It's one of the ways in which I consume knowledge. I see who is publishing stuff and I just follow it. I also use Twitter to build scholarly networks. So for example, I was invited, even though I publish a lot on water, not everybody reads my publications, but I've done a lot of work on water insecurity, and that and my presence on Twitter allowed me to be invited to the Household Water Insecurity Measurement Network. So HWISE is led by Dr. Sarah Young and Dr. Wendy Jepson and Dr. Amber Woodage. And this network now has invited me to a number of events. And this is just a tweet of Professor Young's invitation to an event of HWISE on technologies. And this is also how I built a lot of my networks. I've been on Twitter and I get invited to be to participate in scholarly networks, offline as well, which is fantastic. Number 3 is to refine research ideas. And for example, this is a tweet from me from 2 years ago when I was trying to figure out which books I could use to teach ethnography. So I asked on Twitter, and Dr. Suspira Rishi was kind enough to provide me with some suggestions. So it helps me, pardon me, if I ask my followers on Twitter to give me feedback on an idea, I get a lot of really good feedback. So I have to say, this is fantastic. I find Twitter is sort of my virtual academic seminar. Number 4 is to obtain and offer emotional support. So for example, I am very open about the fact that despite my publication record, I get rejected. And I do this following my former professors, Elinor Ostrom and Vincent Ostrom, who also told us about all the many, many, many times that the Ostroms got rejected. I just want you to realize that a former Nobel Prize, like a winner of the Nobel Prize, was rejected, Dr. Elinor Ostrom and Dr. Vincent Ostrom, who was also a genius. So can you imagine? It's very it's very emotionally supportive to be able to hear from other scholars who feel the same way as I do. So I was sharing here a rejection from a journal, and then Professor Chaires Garza, who is a Mexican scholar at University of Cambridge, he said, well, that's the attitude, but I have to confess that it always hurts my ego, and I usually get mad. Abrazos, profe, hugs, professor. And that's sort of, very heartwarming to know that I'm not alone. And I have to say that both of my writing groups are absolutely incredible at providing this support. And how did I find these writing groups? Yes, on Twitter. That's exactly how I did it. Also to share resources in an environment of scarcity. So this is a conversation between PhD candidate Alicia Porisky and a number of scholars. Among them, one of them is a really good friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Piscopo at Occidental College. And just to see, happy to share my syllabus so many times is just heartwarming. So it's a fantastic way to share resources in an environment of global scarcity. One of the main things that I think is important is that you need to take into account when you're building a presence online, reciprocity. You get from the community what you give. So if you don't give anything, you're not going to get anything. Let me tell you that. Also, you can't just arrive to a community and say, hi, support me. This is not the way it works. So I think the way it works is you support first other people, and then they support you back in reciprocity as well. I'm going to give you 7 tips on how to manage your time and your content on Twitter. And this is based on my own strategy. First, you need to manage your time. Twitter is a time suck. It's an absolute time suck. I could spend days on Twitter. So what I do is I pre-schedule tweets. If you think that I'm online all the time, that's not true. I use Buffer, Hootsuite, and it's Twitter's own scheduling tool to pre-schedule tweets. So actually, when you're seeing me awake, I'm actually asleep. And I also tweet during dead times, and I know that it's a little bit TMI, but yes, sometimes when I go to the loo, I bring my cell phone. It's bad. I know, don't say that, but I'm allowed to say that because I'm a scholar of toilet insecurity. So I should be able to say that. 3, I accept that I want to read everything on Twitter. A lot of people tweet at me and are like asking me questions, and I'm like, people, I have like 43,000 followers on Twitter. There is absolutely no way I can pay attention to everybody. So I am so sorry. I get what I get. I read what I read. And when I'm overwhelmed, I go back to Twitter lists. I also do digital detoxes. Sometimes I just quit Twitter. That's what I call a Twitter bankruptcy. So sometimes I'm like, I need a break from Twitter, and I just go away, and it works perfectly. As for managing your content, the way I manage my content is that I prioritize replies over other content. So I try to first reply to people, and then I prioritize retweeting or retweeting my own stuff, and I try to share other people's stuff on a regular basis. And again, you don't need to be scribbling madly or taking screenshots. I will be happy to provide you with a PDF copy of this presentation. I think that there are 3 main strategies for online community building. The first one is to share. That is finding content from fellow scholars, practitioners, and the general public that you think could potentially be useful to your audience. For example, there are 2 people I retweet a lot, and that's one of them is Dr. Pat Thompson at University of Nottingham, who has a spectacular blog called Potter. And I always retweet her because she has such great content to retweet. Also, Wendy Laurel Belcher at Princeton University, she wrote like the Bibles on how both the first and second editions of Write Your Journal article in 12 weeks. And those 2 are incredible Bibles on how to write an academic article. And I very strongly recommend her books. So there are people that I retweet all the time. I also suggest that you should retweet, and retweet. And I consider that one of the best ways in which you can start building a network is by, and yes, you were right, it's by retweeting. And then I think the third strategy to build online communities is to build and promote other scholars through your own networks like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I don't do TikTok, but some people do, and it works for them. And I think it's fantastic. there's a lot of value in following hashtags, and I created three. One is Scholar Sunday, which actually happens on Sundays, and it's a way of promoting other scholars, not your own research. I know that a lot of people tweet random stuff with the hashtag, but that's not the intention or the intent. But you know what? I've learned after 8 years of shepherding the hashtag, I've just learned to let it go. I think most people use it in the way that I want, which is to use it as a way of promoting other scholars. And I just let it go. I haven't grown it alone. I have grown it with so many people who systematically use it to promote other scholars. So I'm very thrilled, and I'm really delighted that they do. And I'm thankful for that. At the beginning of my career as a professor, I started the My Research hashtag, but then it got polluted, so I never promoted anymore. And then there's the third one that Dr. Steve Shaw at McGill, Dr. Mireya Martinez at Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico, and myself created, and we are supported by Dr. Academic Batgirl on pushing Get Your Manuscript Out. It's a hashtag to motivate you to get your papers out, and that is incredible. And I'm thankful to all the people who helped me build these hashtags. I want everybody to forget about accumulating followers and getting reciprocal follows and so on. That's not how it works. I think you should just think about how you can add value to other people's lives with your content and whatever. I've seen so many people with like following 5,000 people and being followed by 300, and I think that's fine. The thing is, you should use Twitter or Facebook or whichever social network you use for you. And I use mine for me. And sometimes I use it to share useful content. Sometimes I use it to rant and get angry at reviewer 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Sometimes I tweet about James Franco and how handsome he is. And oh my God, please, somebody send me a gay version of James Franco all I need is the gay version because, he has a PhD, or at least he's getting a PhD. So anyway, he's rich and handsome and whatever. So anyway, coming back, just forget about accumulating followers. Don't worry about the followers. Worry about using Twitter for what makes you happy. And also in the way, if you want to use it professionally, use it to add value to other people's lives with your content. Sometimes my random content actually helps people. So that's about the number of followers I have on Twitter. I have about 43,100, but that number is irrelevant. What is relevant for me on Twitter is the connections that I have made there. And that's something I am extremely grateful for. A suggested process to build community online, I think you should follow people whose interest you share. You should follow Twitter lists. I have a list on academic writing and one on homelessness, for example, a topic I'm learning a lot about. You should follow Twitter topics and key Twitter accounts. And I'm going to share a few Twitter accounts that I think are worthy of being followed. I mean, there's a lot of people who should be followed, but these four are sort of very good at connecting you with other networks. So that they're amazing. You should also interact with them, and it can take at least 3 forms: an ad reply, which is a direct chat; a quote tweet, which is a commentary, and then retweet with no quote. Because of the way in which Twitter functions, if you quote tweet me, it will be almost clear that I will never see your commentary because, unfortunately, the framework of Twitter doesn't allow you to provide that specific, those specific ones. So what I think is important that is that if you want to quote tweet me or anybody else, you should include their Twitter ID, because that way they can see it on not only on their notifications tab, but also on their reply tab, which people like me, Tracy McMillan Cottom, Dr. Academic Batgirl, Kevin Gannon, the Tattooed Prof, like all of us who have a metric ton of followers, use the replies to see who is conversing with us. Because the reality is the quote tweets are almost impossible to see them. So I recommend that if you quote tweet somebody that you want them to see your tweet, you should include the Twitter ID starting with the ampersand, um, with the at actually, not the ampersand, so they can actually perceive the tweet. And I'm happy to provide you with some examples on the chat just so that you can have a few ideas. And three, share content and make sure that the content that you share has value as you want to define it. Some people share memes, and I love people who share memes. My own PhD students and master students and undergrad students, I communicate with them on Telegram and I send them memes. So other people share links to events and documents. I think it's important that you share content. Here are 4 people that I think you should be following. They're incredible people, and I actually consider them all good friends. Dr. Academic Bad Girl, she's your superhero. She will protect, you from nasty people all around and provide you with motivation to do absolutely nothing, because sometimes we need downtime, or she will also motivate you to write. Dr. Jennifer Falk, whose Twitter account is From PhD to Life. She is amazing at coaching grad students and PhDs to explore other careers beyond the traditional PhD process. Dr. Petra Boynton, who is also someone who has written a lot. She wrote a book called The Research Companion, and she does a lot of really incredible work building online communities. She has a Facebook page for The Research Companion, and a lot of people actually find a lot of very good support with her. And Dr. Kevin Gannon, those are his puppies, and he's a historian, but he's also an incredibly supportive scholar that provides a lot of emotional support and to all of us, to professors and faculty, and he's very good at the pedagogy and and learning and all of that. So these are 4 accounts. You can follow many other people that are just as incredible. On the value of Twitter lists, I have, for example, Twitter lists on Flint, which is the water disaster in the United States. And I also have a Twitter list on academic coaching. And you can find my lists on my profile as well. On the value of following hashtags, one of the hashtags that I follow the most is AgWriMo, or the Academic Writing Month. But also, if you see, Dr. Mira Holman also has her own hashtag, which is the MIHOS, which is Mira Holman Academic Writing. Oh, Jesus Christ, I forget. But anyway, it's her own hashtag, and there's a fantastic community built around her. But also, there's a great community built around academic writing month, and so on. Shut up and write. I think there is a lot of value in following hashtags. A few do's and don'ts. Don't attack people. I think that should be basic. Don't follow and then unfollow, but you should instead try to engage, provide encouraging and informative content, and follow people out of interest in what they have to say. I mean, I know that there are people who hate follow me, and I think that's a really bad idea. Honestly, why would you want to follow me if you hate me? Like, just unfollow, or mute me if you want. I think blocking is not a very good strategy, but some people do block, particularly when they're attacked, and I understand why they do that. I personally just mute people, and it's amazing. Don't overburden others nor yourself. I mean, there are people who tell me, "Can you please provide me with, a detailed example of how to do a lit review?" I'm like, people, I'm teaching 4 classes. I have 10 grad students. There is absolutely no way I can interact with people that way. So, I think we need to stop trying to overburden people on Twitter, and also don't worry about the number of followers you have. That's completely irrelevant, but you should instead listen, promote others' work, and not just promote your own content. And also, please do never use those "who unfollowed me." Those are really stupid tools. Like, honestly, I don't care who unfollowed me, because the reality is the connections I have are the connections that are meaningful, and that's all. I wanted to also provide thanks to the people who made and released these awesome resources. The presentation template for the slides that I presented today are by Slides Carnival, and the photographs by Unsplash. And I just want to say that the titles are in Playfair display, and the body copy can be downloaded free with the font in real serif. And I know that I don't need to keep this slide in my presentation, but it's important that we acknowledge those people who provide us with free content, free templates, free public goods. And I do not appreciate when people demand or ask for my time, because I don't have any time. Like, I make the time. So in the same way, I also appreciate when people appreciate my work, and that is also quite important to do. You can download Slide Carnival's free templates for all your presentation needs, and I really thank Slides Carnival. And if they have a coffee button or some way in which we can support their website, I'm happy to support them as well, because they're incredible. And you can find me all these ways. You can find me on Twitter at Raul Pacheco, on email, my blog, and my Facebook page. Bear in mind, I get bazillions of emails, tweets, and so on. So if I don't reply, don't take it personally. I don't even reply sometimes to co-authors of mine. So don't take it personally. I have very limited time and very limited attention span. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pacheco Vega, for that great presentation. It was so useful. I was taking some notes and everything, but I'm recording as well. This we will, publish somewhere the recording, and it will be so helpful. And I'm sure there will be so many questions for the Q&A question at the end. So now we need to introduce our second speaker, and so Dr. Janice Gallagher is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Rutgers, Newark. She holds a PhD in government from Cornell University. Dr. Gallagher has researched issues related to social movements, human rights, and justice in Latin American countries. Also, she has her own website, janicekgallagher.com, and she's also very active on Twitter, so follow her. Thank you, Dr. Gallagher, for accepting our invitation and for always being available to help GAS students. Please welcome Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you so much. And let's see, does that look, can you see that? Can you see my slides? Okay, so thank you so much for this invitation. I am very flattered to be sharing a panel with Dr. Pacheco Vega, who really is the expert here. When I was asked to be on this panel with you, I thought, okay, I can see why you're here being asked. I really appreciate being asked. But I think what I have to offer is really kind of a compliment to somebody who is, you keep saying you don't have time. It's because you're doing such amazing work online. And I really thank you for what you're doing and kind of you're making the time to be with us today, and really all the ways that you give to the wider community in your online presence. Maybe it's because I'm a little older. I don't know. Maybe it's because of who I am. I wouldn't say that I've been, I've come to social media and come to my online presence kicking and screaming, but it wasn't natural for me. And I think for a lot of graduate students, it isn't natural. So I'm kind of coming from, to me, I really take a minimalist approach to my online presence. And I wanted to kind of talk from that perspective and kind of, I think to me, you're talking about these ways of being proactive and really making it the center of your professional practice, which I think is awesome. And I also think some of my students at least are thinking, oh, I don't have a website, I don't even have a Twitter handle. Like, what is, how do I even get into this? So I think it's they're nice bookends, and I have a lower 5 presentation, and I will speak more briefly, partially because I think that's fitting given both of our approaches. So I'll make this pretty quick. So building an academic presence online, the minimalist approach. So I think what I wanted to start out with is a very basic insight. Because we live in a digital world, not having an online presence is a presence, right? So I found this out a little belatedly when I went on the job market. I did not have a website the first time I went on the market, which is about, I guess, 6 years ago. And what I realized really quickly, that part of what you're doing as an academic, we are a public facing profession, right? Part of what you're doing in all of your work is presenting to the world, here's who I am, here's what I have to say. And given kind of the world we live in, having online presence is an absolute must. And if you don't have one, it's weird, right? People are like, who is this person that's calling me, that's applying for a job? It seems sketchy, actually. It doesn't seem credible that you are somebody who's kind of ready to blossom into an academic that is contributing to important conversations if you don't have yourself established. So that's kind of how I came to social media, like, okay, and to kind of my online presence is, well, I need to have this. I know I need to have this. So kind of what is that, to me, what did that look like? What are all the different facets happening when we think about our online presence? So I guess to me, you're thinking about when you're thinking why you're building this, who's going to see you, right? Your students are going to Google you. Potential employers are going to Google you. In almost every context I can think of, your interviewees want to know who you are. They want to know who you're connected to. They want to know the kinds of stories that you're interested in, that you're publishing, that you're retweeting, that you're posting on Facebook. If you're doing work which is policy relevant, you better bet those policymakers who you're talking to, who you want to interview, who are thinking about if they want to go on the record with you, or thinking about if they want to give you an hour of their time. If they know that you have 43,000 Twitter followers, if they know, or if they know that you're kind of, friends with people that they might know, or you're in the conversations that they're interested in, that goes a long way. Colleagues are going to be looking for you. And I think it's worth saying friends and family too, right? So kind of your social media presence is of course professional, but I think one of the hard things is figuring out how to navigate the fact that a lot of us as students have been online as private citizens, right? Or I guess, given the access to information, semi-private citizens, right? We're online sharing content about our life, being normal people, putting pictures up of what we did, over the weekend, kind of posting personal content. And part of thinking about building an academic presence is figuring out how to professionalize that. So I just wanted to, think about when you're kind of taking a deep breath and thinking about how to start building an online academic presence, you're thinking about all of these different constituencies that are going to be interested in who you are and what you're doing. So I already started to talk about this, and again, Professor Pacheco-Vega really spoke to this at length. But I just wanted to. He was talking mainly about Twitter. For me, I actually use Facebook much more than I use Twitter, basically because, and I'll talk about this at the end, because in Mexico, among the social movements that I work with, Facebook is still what most people use. So I use it really in terms of my networking and my work. I'm really, Facebook is what I use most. But kind of when you think about your online presence, think about it holistically. Of course, it's your Facebook, it's your Twitter, it's your personal website, but it's also things, think like, basically, when you Google yourself, which I hope you've all done, it's everything that comes up, right? It's talks that you've given in the past. It's articles in the popular press. It's mentions of you from long ago. I think, and I'm going to talk about this, but things come up when I Google myself, like really old CVs where I was like, that book will be out in 2017. Those are still sometimes up there. There's, if you Google me in Swarthmore, where I did my undergraduate degree, there's still an article that comes up about my car, who was named Henrietta, who was stolen. Like, there's just, right, your online presence is already, especially depending on your name, right? If you have a name which is fairly rare, it's going to be, people are going to be Googling you and finding things. So the big thing I want to say is you have an online presence. Curate it, right? You need to control the information as much as you can. It's worth your time to try to control the information people are finding about you. Don't make people research you. People want to know, the kind of the basics about you. Think about how you want to present that information. Don't let that information kind of pop up willy-nilly so that it's impacting your lives in ways that you don't want it to. I think the most obvious thing is Facebook, right? For me, I was when Facebook came out, I was a high school teacher, and I was invited by former students to get on Facebook. So for me, it's always been a venue where I am really conscious that I am, that everything I post, I want to be, how do I say this, appropriate for and kind of consistent with my identity as a teacher and a professor, right? So I think as you're thinking about what job you want and how you want to be seen, think about, even if you're like, well, right now, you know, I don't have professors as my friends, that I think, to me, the line between, unless you're really vigilant, and even then, I think the line between the personal and professional is pretty hard to maintain, right? You meet people at conferences and they're going to Facebook friend you, right? And if you have things on that Facebook, even from like 2006, 2008, that shouldn't be seen by your colleagues, that needs to change. Take your stuff down, right? Do curate your page so that people are not seeing a vision of you that you don't want out there as your professional, in your professional identity, right? So be really careful and think about, and I guess, maybe it feels disingenuous. That's, you know, that is the person you are, but it's not the person you know, because Facebook is kind of this weird personal professional thing. Yeah, I would just say it's already happening that people are using it to evaluate you professionally. So don't be in denial of that and be proactive about it. Same thing, I guess, same thing with Twitter, right? So people use Twitter, and as, again, Dr. Ortega was talking about the weird ways that people can use it to hate follow. I mean, I don't know, maybe we can talk about this. To me, that there's some, I'm only going to follow people. I'm not going to follow people whose content I fundamentally disagree with. Even though I might go on Twitter and check what they're saying, I'm not going to follow people who I don't endorse anything that they're saying. So I think that's kind of being thoughtful about what being friends with somebody on Facebook or following them on Twitter might imply. I'll hit this again. Your website is the easiest. It's really easy to build a website. I guarantee you I'm older than most people that are on this call and not that tech savvy, and I did it in like a weekend, right? So it's pretty inexpensive. And it is a way to, if you have your website, to me, is a clearinghouse where I can send people, where I have total control over the content that's there, and where it's an easy place to go. And I go there often myself when I need my bio, if I need to kind of pull to, you know, make sure my quickest, my quickest description of my book project, the citation for an article I wrote, all of that's there, right? So if it's easy for me, it's easy for other people to go there. One thing I didn't really realize is that all these talks that I've given somehow are pop up, right? If you Google them. I think if you're proud of something you've done, you can stick it into the multimedia section of your website, right? You can direct people to it rather than letting it kind of pop up. Also articles in the popular press, right? So I write for Huffington Post, I've written kind of other popular articles, stick those on there, right? So rather than, again, it's having, thinking about all the things that might pop up when people are looking for you, and instead putting them in an order, giving context, talking about what they are, and owning it, that's part of your professional life. Those are things that you're doing that are relevant for your research, and they belong on a curated page. And again, in terms of the mentions from you from long ago, I actually emailed my former employer. I had a postdoc and they had a really old version of my CV that I didn't want up there anymore. It was outdated, right? So I think I emailed the administrator and they took it down, and it was really easy. So I think also watching out for things that are on there that, if it's just kind of outdated information, seeing if you can make it not be there anymore is a worthwhile, 10 minutes of your time. So again, I think I've kind of said this already, but how do you use technology in your work, and can you share it? So think about the most innovative things you do. I'm sure you're all using technology in intelligent and innovative ways, and that can be a selling point for a potential employer. Think about, especially as some of our more senior colleagues probably aren't using technology in the same ways, that can be your comparative advantage. And again, curate, right? All the stuff you're doing, bring it together, present it as part of who you are and what you have to offer. So in terms of kind of how do I use technology in my work? So I did, if you Google me in Mexico, there's a whole bunch of videos that I did about Mexican politics for a high school curriculum that I now have, I linked to those. I've done some press conferences in Spanish, which I actually haven't linked to. I know they come up and I should, because I've sent them to people as like, oh, here's when we were in this Mexican state doing election observation. And I was just thinking when I was prepping this, like, oh yeah, I should link to that. I did a multimedia timeline, which I just looked at, and something's glitching in it, but usually it's really cool. About the disappearance of the 43 students in Mexico. I didn't do it thinking that it would be kind of part of my kind of technological profile online, but I've gotten a lot of links to it off of my page that have been, and people have liked it. And then video shorts I've done about my research. So I think it's really important to gather all of those things and use them to your advantage. So taking a step back, and this, I was thinking of this as Dr. Pacheco was speaking, how you use social media is super personal, right? A lot of the things that Dr. Pacheco Vega does, I think are really brave, and I don't want to do them. I'm going to be brave in different parts of my life. It makes me scared to be that honest about a rejection. Like, that makes me more scared than comforted. So I'm not going to do it, and that's okay. I think it's great. It can be an amazing venue to be vulnerable, and it can just be vulnerable, right? So I think, to me, there's no right way, right? Like, it's asking yourself the question, knowing that can be a resource, and then knowing yourself well enough to know if that's how you want to use the technology, or I guess not, how do you want to use social media or not? How much time do you want to spend? I need to finish a book really badly, and I know myself well enough to know that it is the cost benefit for me. I really need to limit my time online. And therefore I'm going to do, I need to be online. I need to have a presence, but I need to control it. So that dictates a lot of my approaches. What do you want out of this? Do you want to build community? Do you want to get a job, or do you just want to not be absent, right? Ask yourself really honestly what you're going in it for. Again, for me, so what does that look like for me? Facebook connects me. So I have like 2,300 or so Facebook friends. I think I only have about 300 or 400 Twitter followers. So Facebook is really, for me, where the action is. It connects me. So, and I mean, for all the drawbacks of Facebook, it connects me to the news and to things happening in Mexico in ways that are otherwise impossible. It is really important, as I have kind of gone from different field site to different field site, especially I'm Janice Gallagher. Who am I going to kind of to Sinaloa to talk to people about what's going on there? Seeing that I'm part of a network that we have 150 shared friends is a really helpful reference in terms of who I am. I feel connected with people that I have met during my research, and especially the activist community. So I work with victims of violence who have found that Facebook is the easiest way to get up a new page when somebody has disappeared and get the word out about that. So I'm connected to kind of what's happening with those activists continuingly, and I can share their posts and I can react to them. And I feel like it's a way of being engaged in an ongoing way with those communities, which otherwise wouldn't be possible. So when I share things, when people ask me to share things, I do. And I also, I share my own work, and I also share things that people ask. Personal website is the updated clearinghouse for what I'm doing. Twitter, I really use as a repository for news stories. It's the things that I'm interested in. And also when people ask me to tweet things that are happening, or if I'm doing a talk, then I'll put it up there. But I use it pretty sparingly because it's a time suck for me. And again, I think the golden rule, and I think this is really echoing Dr. Pacheco Vega, is I'm sharing my own work and I'm promoting my colleagues' work. So in conclusion, and pretty quickly, control your online identity. Don't let it control you, right? Googling yourself is good. It's not narcissistic. I mean, it's good. It's part of your job is to know what's out there about you online, and to control it. Build a website if you haven't. Do it now. Those are my quick thoughts. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to join you and to present a very different experience and perspective from Dr. Pacheco Vega's, and I hope you can. I'll be quiet so we can hear more of his incredible experience. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Janice Gallagher. And I think your presentation was very valuable as well, to show this other side of the spectrum in which people are more introverted or not so much engaged with the online world, as is my case, for example. It's always a bit scary and I get overwhelmed and I don't know where to begin. So thank you so much for your tips as well. And all these, also these nuances, right? If you're doing research in another part of the world, which platform people use. So that's very useful. Thank you so much for both of your presentations. And we have a few questions. So we have a couple of questions on the chat, and we have also in the Q&A section. Mm-hmm. If you want to address, I think, do you want to start from the chat?
I have written a response to the ones on the chat, so I'm happy to begin with those.
Okay.
Okay. So with regards to Kevin Ferguson's question on the use of LinkedIn, it is okay to have LinkedIn because recruiters do check it if you want to do something that is not a tenure track position. But for academics, we really do not check it. We check candidates' websites. I have shared searches for academic tenure track positions, which is very bizarre. I am no longer at CIDE. Professor Gallagher knows CIDE and knows Flaxo as well, my current institution. Both of them are amazing institutions. But when I was at CIDE, even as a junior scholar, I was invited to chair tenure track searches. This is uncommon, but this gave me a completely different perspective of the process, right? As an early career scholar, when I began, I was still hiring people, helping hire people. So I never looked at anybody's LinkedIn. I find, and I actually wrote it on my response, and I will post it on the chat. I find creeping Facebook and Twitter of candidates, it's really creepy. In my view, it's super creepy. So I don't do it. I don't let anybody in the search committees that I participate do it. I think it's horrible. But some search committees may do it. So, you know, I cannot emphasize what Dr. Gallagher said enough. Build your own website. And I know I've seen that people have asked her to provide some tips. I've had many lives. I used to be a chemical engineer. I also did public relations. I also have done, you know, a lot of stuff. I think that answers, you know, the point that Dr. Gallagher was saying. I am able to say the things that I am because I'm at a senior stage in my career, right? So I am, you know, unless I do something really bad, it's unlikely that I will be fired. So I can do a lot of things, and I can say a lot of things that need to be said to improve academia from within, and I'm happy to do that and to take that role. But again, I cannot stress enough what Dr. Gallagher said. Build your own website. I program my own because in a previous life I was a programmer. So I program my own, and I use WordPress, and I also do HTML, and I do a lot of very native work on my website. But there's Wix, there's a number of other website builders that you can use. So, you know, just use one of the free webs. Even WordPress has like a free website to build your own. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not use academia.edu to build your website, because that's actually very bad. You should have your own website. Don't let academia.edu build the website. I use academia.edu. I use ResearchGate. I don't love them. I think both of them are ventures that actually, contrary to what people think, they go against the spirit of open access. I mean, they do not actually democratize access to papers. They're you know, ventures and financial ventures. So they're there to make a profit. So it's really important that you know this. So anyway, so it's just important that you know that you should build a website. And on the second question by Lynn Moronsky, on cleaning social media, I think you can use a Twitter cleaning tool. There's a tool that actually deletes all your tweets. I can't, because my website is all built on my tweets. That I also don't do a private Twitter profile. I know that there are people out there who are very creepy and will follow in creepy ways. And, you know, particularly women scholars may want to log their Twitter account. But I'm a public figure. I do it publicly. So for Facebook, I think the first thing to go is through the photos first. I think that's where I would go first for the photos. Also, I see that we have questions on the Q&A. I don't know if Dr. Gallagher would like to answer some questions, and then I can take the next round.
Sounds great. Okay, so my low-tech version of, instead of programming my own website, I used Weebly, and I think I thought about using WordPress, but I went with Weebly, and I bought my domain name through GoDaddy, and that was it. So that was it. So for me, that's I basically followed, and I think, just like, to me, I would think just one. when you're thinking about who you want to be online, I think one of the things that I did was to imitate my older friends and colleagues, right? So I thought, okay, this is a person who has the job, who kind of inhabits their public persona in a way that I really respect and like. And then I went and looked at their website and the same way that we do with CVs, that we do with cover letters, that we do with grant applications, right? Imitating is a form of flattery, and it's okay. That's how we learn what the norms are, right? So thinking about, don't get overwhelmed by it, but think about somebody who's 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead of you, and think about how did they build their website, right? What's their online presence like? I think that can be really helpful. And that's how I decided to do mine. I just looked at the websites I liked and essentially imitated theirs.
Did you design yourself your website or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's really a template. Like by design, what I mean is like I chose the photos and I took them, but I figured out which photo went where. But really, it's pretty no-brainer with Weebly. Like it was just, yep.
Everything.
They have the different elements. It's a drag and drop. It's almost like doing a PowerPoint, right? It's pretty easy. So design is, I think, a too high-tech word for what I did. I drag and dropped pre-existing options, and I don't know what programming is or means, or yeah. So just to present again the other side of it, right? Like I don't really know what I'm doing. Page. Yeah, but it looks nice, so that's great. In terms of cleaning up social media, just to echo, I think deleting the old photos on Facebook is the place to start, and just deleting, right? Kind of going through, taking the time to just delete things. Maybe they're cached somewhere, but then they're not easily accessible. So I think that's the easiest thing. The other thing that some people have done, which I find less convincing. Some people have 2 Facebooks, right? They have a personal Facebook and then they start a professional Facebook. I think it usually doesn't work, because when you look for that person on Facebook, you can find both of their profiles, and you're like, so do you want the picture of Janice with like her hair crazy and whatever, or do you want like the business suit version, right? And so then you're like, I don't know, if you're actually, I really respect what Dr. Pacheco Vega is saying about not Google stalking candidates. I don't know what you think, Dr. Pacheco Vega. I think you're in the ethical minority there. I mean, I assume like the default is to Google people, right? Is to kind of, and I know, we know that there's cases of people who had job offers rescinded because people go and look for what that person has done online in the past. So I think we would hope that there's people like Dr. Pacheco Vega, that there's evolving norms around respecting people's privacy, but I think you should, as a candidate, assume that that's not the case. And I'll take a first shot at one of the Q&As, and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Pacheco Vega. Dean, let's see, this is from Saj. Thank you so much for the question. In terms of the activist and versus advocate, the activist versus academic online presence, I think that's a really great question, and it's part of a really larger answer, right? I think the whole question, so people who know me know that I consider myself both an activist and an academic, specifically in the kind of issue area of human rights and US foreign policy in Latin America, and specifically around issues of violence in Mexico and Colombia. So I've worked really hard to think about kind of how do I have a consistent approach in my scholarship and my activism to what I do, and I think that's reflected online. But I think, Saj, I think you start with figuring out, are the things you're publishing, are the things you're saying, are the things that is the kind of core of your work, does that translate in all of in the activist audience and in the academic audience? Because online, you can't have 2 different identities, right? They're going to be merged. So I think the work of, so it's your question specifically about the social media thing, and I think it's really a much deeper question about how you negotiate the intersection of those 2 in your work and in your identity. So not to pass on the question, but that's what I'd say. I'll think if I can say anything more useful, but I'll throw it back to you, Dr. Pacheco Vega.
Okay, there we go. So Okay, I'm gonna go first to Sadesh. Recommendations for multiple professional circles. I I don't find a lot of I don't follow a lot of people, not because I don't want to follow them, but because I find that the more people I follow, the more overwhelmed I feel. So I I would recommend following Twitter lists and Twitter interests and topics. So that's what I would do, particularly because I really get overwhelmed. A lot of the things, I mean, a lot of the things that look at like I have a presence, I actually do not have a presence. As for Dr. Gallagher, see, the thing is, I've respected Dr. Gallagher's work as an activist and as an academic way before we haven't even had a discussion on social media in academia, right? Like, she's someone who is well known in my circles as, as a Mexican Canadian scholar in the field of human rights. I teach in the Masters of Human Rights at ITAM, and I will probably teach at Flaxo. Dr. Kim Nolan, who is a very close friend of both of us, is an expert in human rights. So I talk to that and I dialogue with that community. And Dr. Gallagher is very well respected in that community because she's able to bridge both. See, the thing is, you can be an activist and a scholar as long as you are very open about it and very clear. This is something that you get out of the discipline of anthropology, positionality. What is your position? Mine, everybody who follows me or reads my work or my publications will know I am a scholar who is interested in reducing the gap between the rich and the poor and who protects vulnerable communities. That's what I do. And people know that. And they will understand that I will not take on some types of work on climate because they're sort of, discussions of elites. But I will take on, as I have now a master's student, doing work on homelessness policy. Why? Because homeless people are more marginalized, and my own positionality is I am an academic who actively seeks to reduce people's insecurity on water, on housing, on food, on toilet insecurity, right? Like, so this is known. Dr. Gallagher is known for that. So it's like, I mean, it's out there. I think I think the fear grad students have is I don't want to be branded as an activist and to be seen as someone who doesn't have credibility because I'm just pushing the whatever agenda. Dr. Gallagher has a PhD, is a professor. She has conducted scholarly research on the activism and the social movements like Ayotzinapa and the 43 that there will be no way she can gain the trust of activists if she doesn't use her scholarly expertise that she has learned and developed to understand that as a social movement. And this is, I've done that with environmental movements. Like environmental movements see me as one of their own. And I'm like, well, I'm an academic, but obviously I want to improve the environment, right? So when we study, this is something that since we are in the Global Urban Studies program, I should make this emphatically clear. Dr. Gallagher's strategy is the correct one because that's how she gains the trust of her interviewees and the communities that she serves and studies and helps as well. So yeah, that's how it goes. And if you're doing urban studies, you're gonna find that this is a position that you may take more than once, right? Like, what happens if you study racism and environmental justice? You're gonna have to, just take it and take the risk. So I yet actually admire and commend Dr. Gallagher for doing that because I think it is important. It's what gives her access to the scholarly to access not only to the scholarly community but also a community of activists that she needs. So I think it's a very smart approach. I honestly think it's a very smart, and I commend her for doing that. On Professor Henderson's question, how I first began building my expertise. Honestly, and this is going to sound so boring, but I started my blog because I was bored. Honestly, out of my mind. I was tired of being a PhD student, and I was like, I'm bored. I want to, write about something else. And then I started writing about, how I did things, and people started doing them, and it became really easy for them. I am unfortunately in my brother's room, so I cannot show you my everything notebook. Everybody who follows me knows the technique of the everything notebook. Is one of my most famous techniques, right? So it's a technique that people all over the world use it. So I just, I just found that helping people, this is natural. I was a student of Elinor Ostrom and Vincent Ostrom. The core of my work is on cooperation. So it's just natural. It's like, but again, as an anecdote, I used to think that I was going to be a professional friend because I was so good. Dr. Luxana Reinaga Ornelas is on this call, and so is her sister, Dr. Guadalupe Reinaga Ornelas, and both Lupita and Luxana know me from childhood, and we all three of us became academics. And we got PhDs and we became academics, but they know me from childhood, and they know that I was always very friendly. So I don't know, it just building networks, building community, and helping people, it just comes natural to me. And it was just cemented with the work that I did under Dr. Ostrom Vincent, Dr. Ostrom Vincent, and Dr. Ostrom Eleanor Ostrom. When we have a strong presence or a good online presence, oh God, this is a great question. And I want to answer these. Larry Doan is one of my most steadfast followers, and I want to answer this question, and then I'm going to go to other questions. But the website's on both languages. I have had really bad luck. I published a lot in Spanish because that was sort of my market, right? And then a lot of people didn't cite me, and I'm like, because this is common, and Professor Gallagher knows this, right? Like a lot of people in English-speaking countries do not cite people in other languages simply because they don't read them, right? I speak 5 languages. I cite people in 5 languages. So it's very frustrating to see my work not cited. So I have switched for a very long time to just publish in English, tweet in English, Facebook in English. Contrary to what people think, my first language is English. It's not Spanish. I do have an accent now, but I learned English before I learned Spanish. So I have found that if I do Spanish and I actually, build a website in Spanish on all of these techniques, it's actually counterproductive because there is so much demand for information on how to do research methods, how to do lead reviews and so on from Spanish-speaking countries, that then my Google rank is gonna go up on the Spanish language section. And then I'm gonna get, again, a dip in citations. So what do? I do a mix, and I do a decent mix, right? Like, so I tweet sometimes in Spanish, I translate some of my blog posts in English into Twitter threads in Spanish. And I am not crazy about the idea of having 2 websites in 2 languages. That I just for the Google rank, right? It really depends on where you want to be seen and cited, which again speaks to what Dr. Gallagher was saying, right? Like, look at what you want to get out of Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, and your website, and build it that way. Maybe you do want. I have a really close friend, really close friend, Dr. Sarah Koopman, who is actually an American, but she speaks perfect Spanish. It's really funny because we both, yes, she's also a good friend of Professor Gallagher. So Sarah and I lived in the same, in St. John's College, and we became like brother and sister. We're siblings. So Dr. Koopman is 100% fluent in English and Spanish. So for her, doing both a website in both languages is valuable and important because she may get contracts to do translating and interpreting. She's a certified interpreter. So as for Larry, I would do that, right? Like, if you want to get something out of both languages, I would very strongly do it. And when can you know when you have a good presence? I wouldn't worry. I think build networks. Honestly, Dr. Sharon Loricella is also on this call, and she's one of my closest friends, and we met on Twitter, right? Like, Dr. Sidney, I used to admire Dr. Sidney and be like, I worship Dr. Sidney, and we became good friends on Twitter, and then we met at conferences, right? Like, that's how you build friendships and connections, honestly. I hate academia.edu because it's a marketing venture, right? Like, it doesn't add any additional value from having a website and posting your publications there. I do it because they have incredible Google rank. So I have my questions on there. So I think I've answered all of those. Yes, and I will also drop my answers, which I wrote on the chat because they were also posted on the chat. But yes, please do continue to ask questions on the Q&A, which is the way in which we can respond.
So just let me just follow up on a couple of things. I think the different languages question is a really hard one, and I appreciate your answer, Dr. Pacheco-Vega, and also think and appreciate your perspective so much. I think you have been really a model of how to, and just how to I really like an early adopter and kind of figuring out how to manifest generosity on social media, and just kind of and build community and use it as an organizing tool. And I think of myself as an organizer, but I'm still a little, but not primarily using online tools. So I just value this perspective so much. And I think and I think it's illustrative that again, it's so personal how we do this, right? So I think for me, like my online presence, I'm still, even in my answer, like, yeah, I am passionately an activist and an academic, but I think in my online presence, because I'm just not as comfortable with the venue as I am in some others, I'm still it's a more hesitant answer because I'm less comfortable with the venue, right? So I think in that back and forth, I think that's instructive, just in terms of the different ways that we're using the medium, or the mediums, I should say. In terms of, I really struggle. I publish in English and Spanish. I organize in English and Spanish. I think in English and Spanish, and I really struggle because I don't know. I don't understand how the Facebook algorithms work enough to understand if Facebook knows to show when I post in Spanish to my Spanish speaking friends. But I feel like a lot of times I'm missing, like if there's something I really want to say to my Spanish speaking friends and my English speaking friends, I'll post in both. And then I always think about which should I do first, which should I do second. And I guess for me, I think we all know that the academic bias is towards English publishing. We also know that we have lots of monolingual followers, and right, either English or Spanish. So to me, if it's important that, if it's important to me that message gets out in both languages, I just put it out in both languages, right? And I try to, when I'm publishing kind of online articles, I always try to make sure that they're being translated into Spanish, right? That's usually something that a lot of online venues will do in terms of our own publishing. So just kind of thinking about, and even, and not just kind of short pieces, right? I think another, like, asking about getting your academic articles translated, right? Thinking about how do you build, if you're somebody who is speaking really fundamentally to audiences which speak different languages, in every kind of thinking all the time about how do you make it accessible. To me, kind of the gold standard is how do I expand access to knowledge, right? Kind of what does that look like? So always pushing that. And it's really, I guess, I think I knew that we both knew Sarah Koopman, but it's really funny that he should. So I think Dr. Koopman has been a long time activist, and I put a link to her website, which is called Decolonizing Solidarity. So she has been a kind of a long time thinker about, she's an interpreter, and she's active in the language justice movement. So if you want to kind of somebody who has spent a really long time thoughtfully building community around language justice, she's a great reference and a way to get into a lot of those conversations. So I would just say, I think it's a really, really important question, Saj, and and I really appreciate the question. Would it be nice to have our websites in 2 languages? I think having your website in 2 languages is a really good idea. I did it. It was really interesting, actually. So I gave job talks in Latin America, both in Mexico and in Colombia. And I'm trying to think, 2 out of those 3 talks were actually in English. Even though I said I could give them in Spanish, they asked them to be in English because I'd say English as an academic language has colonized when I was on the market. I didn't make my website bilingual, and now that Larry asked that, I actually think I should, especially now that I'm saying this. So again, yeah, I think there's not a downside to having it in both English and Spanish, but it's really kind of attuned to the market in terms of think about your audience, right? Think about your goals. And I think that's going to tell you, I don't know if Dr. Pacheco Vega has his website in 5 languages, but I mean, of course it's more work, but I think if it's important to you, I think there's not a downside in doing that.
One thing I want to mention, it is likely that in my case, a lot of people search for stuff related to research support. So that's why my Spanish language website would go up in rank, right? So, but if people search you for your work, like for scholarly work, then you could potentially have it in both languages, definitely, for sure. I'm gonna have to unfortunately leave because we're doing construction at home, so I need to log off and because they're going to shut down all the electrical energy, which means I won't have any internet. So I just want to say to Dr. Gallagher, I am so honored to have been joined by you, and thank you so much to Thayan and Vanya for inviting me. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here. Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Take care. Bye.
So, I have a question for Dr. Gallagher. So my question is from the student perspective, right? From the very beginning, when you just started, the PhD or a graduate program, and you see everything so difficult and challenging, and even the online presence is challenging also. So I'm thinking like, do you think that our online presence change, over time, depending on the different stages of our careers? Like in the first year, how we can start? Like I want to. Now it's my fourth year. I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking, about applying for jobs. So I'm very serious about this and the website and everything. But thinking probably for a first, second year PhD student, thinking about the website, having a portfolio, having all these large networks is too overwhelming. So how this person could start, from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it's because your online presence is cumulative, it makes sense to start early, right? And I think so the way I started think about all those different venues and think about what seems like, I guess, what are you already doing? Like for me, I was already reading the news all the time for Mexico and Colombia as part of my research. So there's actually one of my favorite online presence people is a guy named Adam Isaacson, who's a policy specialist at the Washington office on Latin America. And every day he posts the 15 articles that he reads online. He just posts them, right? And I was like, so I'm already doing that, and he's creating content out of that. So it's just like a quick example. So not that you have to do that, but my version of that was starting just to get yourself a Twitter name, register for Twitter, and just start following people, liking things, and if you're reading an article that you like and you're like, this is really relevant to what I think about, retweet it, right? So just kind of putting your toe in the water. For me, I never decided that I wanted to kind of have a Twitter presence, and I kind of don't, but I think it's I have enough of a presence on Twitter that I'm like, a person. You can tell what my research interests are. They're consistent with my scholarship and who I am. And it's pretty low. It's pretty low stakes. Doesn't take that much time. And you can see that I've been tweeting things about disappearances in Mexico, for example, going back to 2000. And I don't know. I actually don't know when going back probably, I would guess 8 to 10 years, right? And same with Facebook. I think just thinking about what you already do and saying, okay, someday this is going to be part of a website, right? And if I don't this is a little thing, but I'm very busy right now because I'm about to submit my manuscript, but I got invited to do a blog that's 1,000 words about things that I already write about enforced disappearances versus non-enforced disappearances. And I just kind of thinking about when you're being asked to do something like this, right? this is going to be what we just did. You have a recording of, you put it together, and it could already go on a website that you would have someday. You have this recording, and it could already go on something in terms of your service and your being active professionally, right? So just thinking about, like, when you're deciding to do things, when you're deciding how to save things, when you're reading things online, what a lot of those things are part of your job, right? But you're not making most of them public. So putting them in a place where you kind of remember what you're doing and think about, okay, this is really kind of, when I put all these things together, it paints a pretty coherent picture of who I am, right? I'm somebody who's reading this type of news, who's doing this type of professional activity, and just started, and like throwing that up into a website maybe feels scary. And I don't think you really have to do it before you go into the field, before you start interviewing people. I don't like, it's not as important, right? But I think as soon as you're starting to do field work where you're trying to get people to talk to you, which is going to happen before you apply for grants and before you apply for jobs, then I think you want to kind of put those things together in a website. But just as a first or second year, if you don't have a Twitter handle already, get one. I don't know. And again, Facebook, I think, is up to you guys in terms of, do you think that's do you like Facebook? Are you reading news there? For me, it's where because of, again, my research site, it depends on your research site. So when you think about, again, people who are thinking about the things you're thinking about, go look at what social media are they on? What are they using? So I would just say it is a toe in the water thing, right? It is not an all or nothing, like, okay, this week I'm going to build an online academic presence. It is cumulative. So just like doing little things and saving the things that you do and thinking about, and just tweaking your thinking. So you're thinking about, how does this all come together someday, as part of telling the story about who I am and why it would be great to have me teaching your students and publishing at your university, right? Like, in the end, that's the case you're making. So I think you're already doing all of this stuff. So save it.
And what about LinkedIn? I mean, because that was my first step, but then I found that Twitter is even more interactive.
I think Raul just wrote to Camille Ferguson about LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Your question's about LinkedIn. Yeah, I think LinkedIn doesn't really work for academics. If you are thinking about doing policy work, if you're thinking about being in the nonprofit world, then sure. LinkedIn, to me, it's super basic. Like my LinkedIn profile, I have my profile up there, but it just is the history of my jobs. Like I don't use it. I mean, I use it if I'm trying to figure out who somebody is and I don't find them on Facebook, maybe I'll look on LinkedIn, but academics just don't really use it to find out who people are and to do hiring. It's really expected that you're going to have a website, right? It's in the same way that academics don't have resumes, we have CVs, right? Like it's just a norm. So it's not bad. It's just kind of irrelevant. So it's fine to have it out there and it's part of what you're doing, but it's not for whatever reason. And I don't think the reason really matters. I think the reality is it's just not that helpful. So it doesn't hurt, but just, I think it doesn't give dense enough information. Like people want you to, I think what Dr. Sydney said is if students want to go for non-academic jobs, then it can be useful, definitely, and there's no downside. And I think it's pretty quick, right? It's at least the way I use it, I don't know if I'm doing it wrong, but I just have my past job experiences on it, so it's fine to have it there, and it's worth having a presence there. But I think if you're thinking about academia, it's great to have the website. Okay. I don't know if there's anything.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I didn't know about all these details, to be honest.
Me either.
Yeah, and the importance of the website. I just thought that it was something that as you gain experience and you become a professor, then you develop one. But actually, no. Actually, we should have already.
So hi, Chris. She asked, are there any tips on what headlines students should highlight on their personal website if they have not yet published? So if you have ever gone to a conference, if you have a paper from a class that you're thinking of developing into an article, I love the title working papers, because what's a working paper? It's a paper you're working on. So if you're like, there's 3 things you've written in graduate school that you're like, maybe I'll send those out someday to try to get published, you can call it a working paper and put it on your website, right? Including your prospectus, right? For those of you who have a title, like a tentative title for your dissertation, that goes on your website under research. That's the current state of your research. So if you feel, I'd say if you feel comfortable enough, and I don't know if Dr. Sydney, who I know is here, would agree with me, but I think if you're comfortable enough with your dissertation topic to present it, if you're kind of getting ready to defend it, or especially if you've already defended it, then that's enough to put on your website. I mean, again, you want it out there so that anybody you might want to collaborate with, anybody who's also researching some more things, that you're connecting to them and they know who you are, right? That your kind of name is out there as somebody who's working on this stuff. And that can be, so putting up early drafts just to say, this is the kind of thinking I like to do. This is the kind of researcher I'm probably going to become. And that's constantly changing, right? Like you should be updating it all the time. But just as a kind of you're like, I'm only a 3rd year, what do I put up there? Well, maybe you had work experience prior to coming up here that is still informing who you are and what you're doing. Put that up there, right? So put up your research interests. So it's just helping people understand, you're getting on their radar about somebody who's out there thinking about things that they might find interesting too, right? So I think, those are that's what I would say, Chris. As well as any, again, I think for you guys, you can put links to this, to even to this webinar, and kind of any other kind of work that you're doing. One of the questions was about, just to weigh in, I know we're getting near the end of time, was about the academia.edu. And I don't know why Dr. Pacheco Vega doesn't like it so much. I think it is essentially, I think it is a marketing website, whose goal is to make money. I mean, most of these sites are, I guess, but academia.edu, I think, is regarded by most academics as kind of, at least I think about it as trying to manipulate me into spending money to things that I can find out in other places. So it's just seen as kind of a for-profit version of things that, it's providing services that are not vital.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Janice. I'm not sure if we have other questions, but if we do, you can come up with them. If not, we can just wrap it up. Let's see. I'll give 1 minute. You're muted, Vanya.
I know. Yeah, 1 minute for posting last question. Actually, one question. I think there is time only for one question, maybe.
Yeah. Just as a last question, do you remember personally what was the professor or colleague that you inspired when you were building your website, or do you remember?
It won't surprise people who've taken my social movements class. It was Phil Ayub.
Oh yeah.
Right. It was Chris Cepeda Migan. It was Phil and Chris. I remember I went to a lot. Dr. Cepeda Migan is in Chicano Studies at UCLA. I believe that's the right department. He's trained as a political scientist at Cornell, which is where I was, where I did my PhD. And Phil Ayub is now at I can't remember. He used to be at Drexel, and now where he is escaping my mind because I'm on the spot. But he does incredible work, and he works on LGBT issues in Europe, but was also a social movement scholar trained at Cornell. So the two of them are the ones that I remember going to. Dr. Gabrielle Crooks-Wisner, who's been a long-term mentor and one of my best friends, who's a professor at UVA. I also looked at her website. So yeah, I mean, people who are 2-3 years above me, is basically who I was looking at. People who kind of had the types of jobs that I hoped to get when I was a graduate student, and were building the kind of careers that I wanted to have. So that's who I got. One thing, Larry, I just saw one of the questions. Larry asked, when do we know that we have a strong presence or a good, at least a good online presence? I think when you Google yourself and the things that you want to come up, and the things that you don't want to come up, don't appear on the first page. That like story about me in my car is like fine, but it's not what people need to read about me, you know, when they Google me. So I think one thing I think one thing, if you have a more common name, I think it's a really different ballgame in terms of building your online presence. So a lot of people I know use a middle initial. I have a friend named Philip L. Johnson, right? So he uses like, it's really difficult if you have a more common name. And I think you have to really work harder to brand yourself. And in some ways it's just pretty impossible. Like, how do you stick out in the crowd to make sure people can find you? But I think using a middle initial can be a really important thing. But that's what I would say, right? You should come up when people Google Janice, Mexico, social movements or something, right? You want to come up. That's at least my non-scientific litmus test, is that you're being found in searches that you want to be found in. Yeah, I think that's
okay. Thank you so much, Janice, Professor Janice, for being here with us. And I think we had great presentations and a great discussion. And I hope that the resources that we shared here today helped you to start building your academic online presence, or boosting it if you already have one but were feeling unmotivated. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and I hope to see you soon in our next event. And you can always follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and find us there as well. Thank you, Professor. We love you. Yes, love you.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Have a safe, healthy holiday.
Yes, yes.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.